Hello and welcome to the FootballCo Business Podcast. I'm your host Alex Manby, and today I'll be talking to Guus Pennings, Head of Brand and Sponsorship at Philips and former Head of Marketing and Media at PSV. Many football fans will be aware of the long-standing relationship between PSV and Philips, and indeed that the club was founded as a football team made up of employees from the company way back in 1913. Since then, the two entities have been intrinsically linked. Of course, today's PSV isn't made up of Philips staff, and just as the club has evolved, so too has its partnership with the brand, which remains the longest running club and brand partnership in football. Let's get into today's podcast. Guus, welcome to the show.
Hi Alex, thank you.
So Guus, most people listening to this podcast are interested in the business of football. The clue is in the title, after all, and so they might be aware of the Philips and PSV relationship. But for those who aren't, could you give us a brief overview on the history?
Well, a short overview on the history is what you already mentioned, Alex, is that we founded PSV back in 1913. Where it started as an employee team. So sometimes we say, well, it was the first corporate vitality program, what the big multinationals are running now, but then, in a very simple way. And when Philips evolved towards that multinational company, also PSV evolved. And well, the relationship has always been very strong, but it's PSV is on its own legs now, and but we're still working very closely together.
Well, and indeed, your career history mirrors that, right? You were at PSV for many years and now at Philips. Is that a common switch for people to move between the two?
No, actually, if you look to the past, it was more a common switch to start at Philips your career and then move to PSV, because when we talk about 30, 40 years ago, PSV was still owned by Philips, and it was that employees from Philips were running PSV as well. And the other way around, what I did, it's not very common. So, but what you say, Philips and PSV very closely related to each other. And if I talk to my grandpa, for example, he doesn't see the difference between working for Philips and working for PSV. So when PSV plays that Saturday night, and I visit him on Sunday morning, then he asks me, "What did Philips do yesterday in the match?" So, well, I said, "Okay, PSV won," but for them it's still the same. But yeah.
That's a fantastic story about your grandfather, and clearly the two histories are absolutely linked, both club and brand. And fast forward to today, and that link is still very much active. Last year, for example, there was a new 10-year relationship, a new 10-year deal signed between Philips and PSV. But with one difference, while PSV will continue to play at the Philips Stadion, these days the brand isn't on the front of shirt. Why is that?
Well, I think Philips moved from the shirt, it's about 6 years ago. And Philips is in transition. The company is in transition towards a health technology company. And well, every time when we have to extend this partnership, we ask ourselves the question, and I think that's what we owe to ourselves as a multinational company with shareholders. How can the PSV platform still work for Philips? And well, looking towards the challenges that we have nowadays as a health technology company, we think the added value of being on the front of the jersey or the shirt isn't that much anymore. So we made it available for PSV to get some commercial growth, but we also continued working with PSV for another 10 years, as you mentioned, on a very high level. So we're still one of the biggest partners from PSV, but in a way that works for us as the company that we are nowadays.
Was that a difficult decision? Front of shirt is a pretty sizable, important part of real estate in the world of football. Who took that decision, and how did you come to it?
Well, actually, when the decision was made, I was on the other side. So I was at PSV. So for us, it was a different angle. And so who actually made the decision? I can't tell you that. But I think in terms of doing the right thing and with respect for the history and the legacy that you created together. Finding a way that PSV can still really work for Philips and the Philips brand, it's the best way to continue. And of course, there were a lot of well, you call it sentiments, I guess, especially among fans, because when you found this club and you are on the jersey for 36 or 37 years, so from the start that actually jersey sponsoring was started, we've been there until 37 years later, and so people around PSV, they didn't see Philips as a jersey sponsor or a shirt sponsor. They just saw Philips as part of the design of the PSV shirt. So there were a lot of. It was a big step, but although I was working for PSV in that time, I wasn't that surprised. And if you think rational about this decision, also when you are working at PSV, you can imagine that this is a good and right step. And when in the end it made it possible for PSV to realize commercial growth, because Philips continued on another partner level or another financial level, but there was some space to get another jersey sponsor.
It's interesting. I spoke to Rob Warner on a previous episode of this podcast, and he's a football shirt designer and has been involved in the design of many kits, and we talked about brands on the front of shirt. And how some of them just naturally feel like they belong there, and others stick out like sore thumbs. And you're right that with PSV, I think back over the course of many decades, and Philips logo just sort of feels like it belongs there. Yeah. It's interesting also to me that the replacement of Philips when the brand decided to leave the shirt sponsorship is Brainport. That feels like quite a sort of natural progression. In line with both Philips' values and PSV's as well. Yeah. I suppose that wasn't a coincidence.
No, it wasn't. But to be fully right, there was another main sponsor in between. So there was an energy company called Energy Direct, and they actually followed up Philips as the jersey sponsor. And so that was just another brand, just another company. And in the beginning, PSV fans were a bit, surprised, and they have to get used to that new sponsor. But after 6 months or 12 months, they really embraced that new sponsor. After 3 years, they decided to continue with PSV, but not on the front of the shirt. And then, PSV came to that really innovative kind of partnership with Brainport, and we are highly involved in that as Philips. Actually, there are a lot of values in that partnership that are the values that Philips carried on from the early beginning. So, we're really happy to be. We'll be on the shirt. We're still on the shirt, but then in another way.
Could you tell us a little bit about Brainport? Some people may not be aware of what it does and what its goals are.
Yeah, but yes, Brainport is actually a region, the region, the Eindhoven region. It's a really high innovative and technical ecosystem. A lot of big technical companies are based here in this region, and we share the same goals, but we also share the same challenges. So what Brainport needs is to be bolder and even bolder on the global map to attract talent from all over the world to come and work here in the region for these companies. But we also, as Brainport, we want to improve the climate here in this region, to live here, to work, to be vital, and to make sure that everybody who is part of this ecosystem, and that are not only the people who work for the companies, but also the people who just live here for many years, that they are, they actually see the benefits of the character of this region. And so we share actually a bigger goal than our own goals as individual companies, and that brought us together. And that's why we decided to not put Philips or ASML on the jersey, but to put Brainport on the jersey. Because if Brainport reaches the goals, then we all benefit from that.
It's interesting, Guus, because you've used the word "we" to describe Brainport and also Philips and I think PSV as well, which of course makes sense that you used to work there. You also use the word partnership. It feels like a really symbiotic relationship.
Certainly it is.
And PSV, and probably more so than your typical brand club sponsorship. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say, and I think that's the one of the unique aspects from this partnership, because sometimes I mention the 6 companies who are actually paying this partnership to put Brainport on the shirt. But it are actually 7 because PSV is the 7th. And in this kind of partnerships, you're not a right holder as a club and you sell a sponsorship. No, you're actually working with these companies because, what our CEOs always tell is when they go to China, for example, they step into a cab and the cab driver says, "Oh, where are you from?" And then they say, "Well, I'm the CEO of Philips, for example, or I'm the CEO of ASML." No response. And then he says, "Well, we're based in Eindhoven." And they say, PSV Eindhoven, from Ronaldo and Romario and that kind of, Ruud van Nistelrooy and that kind of things. And then, that opened actually their eyes. And they said, well, we need to team up with PSV because PSV can accelerate our presence in especially in the Netherlands and in the region, but also in some parts of the world. And so that's really a strong thing of the partnership, that we're working together, and PSV has to put a lot of effort in this partnership as well, way more than they should do in a traditional shirt sponsorship. And what we're also doing is, you see a lot of sponsors that they sign a sponsorship with a club, then they hire a sponsorship manager or a sponsorship team, a specialized agency, and they start activating the partnership. And we choose for a way of working that in all the projects that we're doing together, we are cooperating with specialists from that 6 or 7 companies. So when we work on vitality programs, for example, then we have the vitality guys from these companies all brought together. And that's the same thing on recruitment and marketing communication. So in the end, I think there are 50 people from these 7 companies who are working together in different project groups to make this partnership work. And that's a different approach, I guess.
It's an amazing evolution, really, if you think about it, from back in 110 years ago when the club was founded purely as a, I guess, recreation activity for employees of the brand. And as it grew, Philips was the financial muscle behind the club and its growth and its rise to sit at the top of European football, albeit relatively briefly. PSV as a club has changed hugely. It feels to me like the relationship between Philips and PSV has too, up to the current day, which you're just explaining there, which is probably more complex, and I mean that in a good way, than it's ever been before.
Yeah, I think it's more complex. Well, it's on one way it's more complex. On the other way, it's more easy because the relationship is still very tight, and we have a really close bond, but it's on professional terms. So they are the club, and they are running their own club, and we are the sponsor. We are the sponsor of the stadium, and we are still having our own professional partnership with PSV, and we are highly involved in that Brainport partnership. But it are 2 companies now, the club and the sponsor. So I think that makes it more easy and more professional. On the other hand, I think it was easier back in the days when we were that consumer electronic company, put the logo on the shirt, make sure our exposure was on top level. We had our hospitality options with PSV. That was a way easier to actually make this partnership work for us. And the things that we're now working on together, and I think we'll make a deep dive into that afterwards, but that requires more effort from PSV, but especially from Philips to make sure that our innovations, our solutions, and our research capabilities, that we can make them available to PSV to help them building a better performance climate. So it's not giving them your logo, no, it's giving them your expertise, and to implement actually your expertise within the environment of PSV.
Let's make that deep dive. That sounds interesting. What does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis, and how does Philips help PSV in the performance side of things?
Well, when you speak about the brand, our mission, our purpose as Philips is to make people's lives better. And when we let's say project to that to PSV, then we say, well, we want to make the life of every PSVer a bit better. So we want to get the most of the life of every PSV. Every member of the PSV family is what we say, and that means the players in the first place, but also fans and everyone around PSV. But keeping it to the players, PSV will never be the richest club of Europe. But if you're not the richest, you have to be smart to still be able to compete with the top European clubs. And PSV's philosophy is to create their own stars, because they're not always able to buy the new stars. So they have to develop that players. And well, of course, when they add their value to PSV, they sell them to bigger European clubs, and that's actually their model. And in that journey to develop young players to European stars, there are a lot of aspects on that journey that Philips can work on with PSV. And so we actually combined these projects under an umbrella, and we call it the PSV Top Performance Center. And that's a triangle between PSV, Philips, and the St. Anna Hospital in this region. And then we're working on various studies, but also various projects to get more out of the sleep of PSV players, because sleep is really a big domain within Philips, and we have a lot of researchers that are busy with improving sleep for not only for athletes but for people all around the world. So using that expertise to make PSV players able to recover better after their sports. Other examples is that we do, for example, studies with our ultrasound machines. We combine them with 3D cameras, and then we are monitoring the muscles of PSV players over 2 years, maybe 3 or 4 years even, to see what kind of muscles we can define among a group of players. And what you see now in professional football is, the group part of the training, it's always it's one size fits all. Everyone gets the same treatment. And what we want to see, and what PSV wants to know, is what kind of players have what specific, let's say, ingredients in their muscles, and how should we make them ready or prepare them for the next match. And these kind of projects are way closer to the core of PSV, like performing better than we were in the past. And I think professional football, it's all about that marginal gains. So improving 1% or 2% can be the difference between being champions of the league or being second. And so I think that's a really important role that we play now. We're close to the core business of PSV.
It's a fascinating subject, marginal gains, and it's something which has been explored by sports organizations, and different solutions are proposed and used by different organizations. Sleep seems to come up all the time with this question of marginal gains. I know that, for example, Ryan Giggs used to fly his favorite mattress wherever Man United were playing away for an away Champions League game, because he couldn't sleep properly on hotel mattresses. I saw a study, leaving aside professional sport for a second, I saw a study talking about the effects of COVID in the last 18 months or so. And something which continually came up is people are sleeping worse. And it's a very emotive topic. I think even for non-professional sportsmen like you and me, we care about how much we sleep. We worry about it. Every morning we think, did I sleep well? Did I sleep badly? What is it?
But Alex, sorry to interrupt, but the funny thing is, when I ask you what kind of brand is your mattress, I think you're not aware of what kind of brand your mattress is. You know the brand of your phone and your headphones and your shoes and but the thing that you're spending 1/3 of your life on, you're not aware of what are the specs of that and what brand is it and what are the USPs of it. So I think that underlines the fact that that it's still a thing that there's a lot of progress to make in sleep, I guess.
You're absolutely right. I have no idea, but it's something I'm going to check immediately after this podcast. So can you tell me a little bit more about what Philips are doing then with sleep, how to work with PSV Eindhoven, and then how to help the general public improve their sleep quality?
Yeah, sometimes in some projects we say PSV is for Philips like what Formula One is to car manufacturers. So, they develop a hybrid system, and when it's suitable in Formula One, then a few years later it's on the road for everyone. And we have some projects with PSV where we actually where we're actually learning and developing our solutions. In terms of sleep, it's the other way around. So we created something for general public. It's called the Smart Sleep headband. It's just a small headband, and that gives you the opportunity to get more of your sleep. So it doesn't bring you in an earlier sleep. It doesn't extend your sleep, but it helps you to come in a deeper sleep after the moment you fall asleep. So you can imagine that professional football players, they play their matches at Saturday evening at 9 o'clock or during weekdays, and then they're full of adrenaline and they have to do that sponsorship duties, media duties, and they go to bed at 1:30 in the night, and the next morning they fly back to Eindhoven, and 2 days later the next match is on. So if we can help PSV with this solution that we already have and that we are only improving, to make sure that the players, they sleep 6 hours in the night, but there are 6 hours of really good quality. Research shows that the way players recover and they are ready for the next match is way better if they use that solution. And it's not for everyone. So what we're actually doing now is we're testing that with PSV. So a group of players is using the product. Some players who are really enthusiastic about being conscious with their body and their personal elements of being a professional football player. So, but some players say, well, for me it doesn't work, or I feel better sleeping without, and that's fine as well. But that's on the field of sleep, what we are now doing together, for example.
It's something Arsene Wenger was hugely passionate about and interested in. I know that when he was at Arsenal, he would have the players fly back to London after the night of a Champions League game, regardless of where they were playing. Because exactly everything you've said, Guus, the players would come off, more than anything, they'd be pumped up with adrenaline. And he'd say, rather than have them sleep, 2 or 3 hours and sleep badly in a hotel room and get up in the morning and fly back and land in the afternoon, he would say, let's just get on a plane. And they would fly back, and land at 6 in the morning. And he would say, right, you probably haven't slept on the plane, but now go home and get your 6, 7 or 8 hours in your bed where you're comfortable.
Yep.
It's interesting. And innovation is a word that keeps coming up, and innovation seems to be at the forefront of both what Philips and PSV Eindhoven do. It's interesting. The realities of being an Eredivisie club today probably mean innovate or get left behind. You spoke about the impossibility of signing a Ronaldo Fenomeno, a Ruud Gullit, etc., and instead this necessity to develop youth players and sell them. I suppose there's a direct parallel between that, which is very different in a comparatively short space of time. We're only talking 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, that PSV were buying these players and winning the European Cup. And then the parallel would be with Philips, which I suppose what Philips are doing and manufacturing and selling today is totally different to what it was 25 years ago. Is that a coincidence? Do the two push each other forward? What's the relationship there with innovation between club
I think the two push each other forward, definitely, but it's not only the two. I think the innovative character of PSV, I think it's a bit in their DNA because Philips is in their DNA, and Philips has always been innovative since 130 years already. But it's not only Philips, because PSV is in this region, what we were talking about earlier, and the characteristics of the region are that we are very, very high tech and very innovative, and we have not only in high tech but also in a way of thinking. I think it isn't a coincidence, Alex, that PSV and Philips are both that innovative. But I think it's not only Philips that drives PSV to that. It's also the ecosystem where we spoke about earlier with the other big companies in this region. So it's innovative on terms of high tech, but it's also innovative in the way of thinking and the way of approaching things. And I think that differentiates PSV from other clubs, especially in the Netherlands. And we're very happy to play a role in that way of working.
I understand that, and the history is fantastic, and the two brands, PSV and Philips, are clearly interlinked and share values and so on. And maybe this is slightly sensitive, I want to understand what's in it for the brand today. Philips is a huge electronics, technology, healthcare company with massive multinational presence. And with all due respect to PSV, while they're globally known, former European Cup winners, many great players have worn the shirt, they're probably not in the global limelight on a regular basis. I think that's fair to say. And if we think about locally, surely everybody in Eindhoven, in fact everybody in the Netherlands, already knows Philips as a brand and already knows Philips for their relationship with PSV. So I suppose for you, what are the values of the sponsorship, and what do what do Philips keep getting out of it?
Yeah, well, it's a fair question, Alex. And I think what's most important, we call this a brand partnership for Philips. So we don't use PSV to sell our product. Well, sometimes we have campaigns together that's more on the business side, but it's mainly brand. And as you mentioned, the people in the Netherlands, and especially around Eindhoven, they know Philips very well. But I think Philips is developing faster than people know and be aware of. So the region Eindhoven, the Brainport region, it's still our home region. That's where we grew up. We still have over 8,000 employees in this region. 40% of our global research is taking place in the Brainport Eindhoven region. So we really want to make sure that, especially on our, let's say, home ground, that people know the Philips brand as it is nowadays. And we can tell them with fancy commercials or with stories with hospitals where we work together with. But we know, and we see in research as well, that when we build relevant cases with PSV on the field of sleep or on the field of ultrasound and that kind of things, the people around Eindhoven and in the Netherlands are way more open for that message than they are when we don't involve PSV in the project. So PSV is really a platform for us to tell the people in the region and in the Netherlands and even abroad, to show them what kind of brand Philips is and what kind of things we're working on nowadays.
So how important is it, Guus, then, that PSV have on-pitch success, be that in the Eredivisie or participating in Europe's premium competitions?
Well, I think it used to be more important than it is now, because when we were a fully consumer electronic brand, we want to be visible on the highest podium with the biggest audiences. And well, we're still one of the main partners of PSV. That means we're still a bit of fans of PSV. A lot of people that work for Philips, they grew up with PSV, so they have PSV in their hearts. And of course, we want to celebrate trophies and other beautiful moments with PSV. But for the way that we are working together, well, it's not that important if they play Champions League, Europa League, or they become top of the league or second. So we really want it because that can be a result of the things that we're doing together. But it's not a critical factor in the way we evaluate the partnership.
No, I can see that the emotional connection and the way of positioning the brand via what you do with the club is crucial to that. I wonder what impact it has financially. When you sit down to negotiate the new deal, this new 10-year deal that was signed last year, in a monetary value, how much emphasis is placed on performance? Because in a typical club sponsorship, the brand will sit there and they'll say, well, if you're in the Champions League, we'll pay you this. Or they'll say to a Premier League club, if you're relegated to the Championship, the value of the sponsorship will reduce by X. Is that a consideration?
Well, that's a fair question, or a good question, Alex. Well, in the current partnership with PSV, there is no performance-based fee. So, well, in that way, it's for us, it's not that important. I think when you compare it to maybe some English clubs where you have that companies from abroad, maybe the betting companies or that kind of companies, they need eyeballs and exposure all over the world. And then it's really important aspect if you play Champions League or not, for example. But I think the brands that are the biggest sponsors in the, especially in the Dutch league, with the top clubs like PSV, they want to really connect with the PSV brand. That's what we want, and we want to work together on relevant cases. So So I don't know how the partnerships work in other countries with performance-based fees, but I know that we don't have it in the contract now. And I know from I know from other sponsorship contracts in the Netherlands that sometimes there are performance-based fees, but they are just a really low percentage of the total amount of sponsorship fee. So I think that what I'm saying about Philips and PSV, how we're working as brands together, I think that's also counts for many other sponsors in competitions like the Dutch competition.
No, it's an interesting point, Guus, and I guess ties into this overall narrative about this long-term relationship between Philips and PSV. Something we've noticed at FootballCo is a tendency for the profile of players to become increasingly bigger than clubs. You only need to look at Instagram and see who the most followed account is, not just in the world of football, but the whole world of Instagram. It's Cristiano Ronaldo with over 350 million followers. And so players seem to be perhaps increasingly attractive to a brand because they cross borders, they're admired all over the world. And so many brands are leaning towards player sponsorships, maybe more than clubs. Is that something you've seen? I'm sure it's not relevant in this case because of these long-term links, and PSV Eindhoven will be around long after any player who's currently playing. But is that something that you're aware of?
Well, I fully agree with you that the world became smaller and there are no borders anymore. So when I was young, I just watched the Dutch league, and now people from 7 or 8 years old, they also watching FC Barcelona play and seeing the Premier League and wearing Messi jerseys and that kind of thing. So yeah, I agree. And but when you talk about a real sponsorship and getting into the hearts of your audience or the fans, I think the passion of most fans is still with the club and not always with the player. And of course, you have a few exceptions in the world, like Cristiano Ronaldo that you mentioned, and Nike will be there long after his career. But I think in most countries, what you see is that players come and go at PSV, but also at German clubs, at English clubs, at French clubs, etc. And the love for the club that stays. So I think when you can really make a really strong partnership with football clubs and you activate it really well as a brand, you can also get in the heart of the fans. And I think that the club platform is then a better platform than just an athlete on social media.
Because I'm sure Cristiano Ronaldo wouldn't appreciate you saying in 2 years he won't be at the top podium, but I think what is certainly true is that Nike will still be with him, and that's a long-standing relationship. Although certainly he won't be around in 100 years still playing. So, well, not playing at the highest level anyway. I think we can say that. Guus, I wondered, looking at the future then, and talking about these long-standing relationships and how clubs live longer than any player, we can look at over 100 years of history between PSV and Philips. Will they still be going in 100 years? That's pretty hard to see without a crystal ball, but do you see this going on for many more decades? Is it dependent on any factors?
Nah.
Visibility for the brand, or an ability to collaborate on projects, or these shared values about innovation that you've talked about?
Yeah, I think we will still be there for a while, because what you mentioned, we just extended the partnership with 10 years. And in 10 years from now, I think we have to ask ourselves the same question. Well, where's the company Philips now, and how can PSV contribute to the goals that the company has? And if the answer is still yes, PSV is a really a good, let's say, platform for Philips, then we will be there for a while, I guess. But that's on a personal note, and the world is developing very fast, and so is Philips, and so is PSV. So 10 years is really far from now, and like you, I don't have a crystal ball either. So let's see what happens.
Guus, thank you very much for your time. It's been fascinating hearing the story about PSV and Philips, this long-standing relationship and how it continues to develop based on these core values that both entities share. Is there anywhere our listeners should go to find out more, whether to hear your musings or understand more about club and brand?
Well, of course, you can follow PSV on their social media channels if you're not doing that already. But my favorite platform is Twitter. And my Twitter handle is at GuusPE. So that's where I share my views on sports sponsorship, on the way we work with PSV, and where I love to be in touch with people and listeners. So feel free to connect.
Thanks very much, Guus, and thank you for listening to today's show. We've got some great guests coming up in this new podcast series, so if you want to hear more content like this on the business of football, make sure you're following the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. If you liked this, the full episode will be available on footballco.com, where you can also check out the show's archives. Thanks very much. All the best.